Hey everyone, this is the Love of Cinema podcast. We like to talk movies. If you like to talk movies too, you come to the right place.
Aditya Pancholi's one of his first dialogues in the beginning of the movie. That itself sort of sets the tone. When they go and they sprinkle petrol everywhere, and Baba's about to light everything on fire, and Aditya Pancholi in that typical Bombaya Tapori style, he goes, "Hey Baba, ये आग एकदम खड़ूस चीज है क्या?" That you see that and you're like, okay, this you kind of get the mood, like, okay, this is the zone in which this movie is going.
In one of the several sleek action sequences from Sanjay Gupta's Aatish, Sanjay Dutt takes on Vishwajit Pradhan and his crew at one of Mumbai's most beautiful locations, the now defunct Cafe Naz at Malabar Hill. It's a sequence that cranks up trademark Sanjay Dutt swag, flaunts Gupta's eye for stylistic storytelling, and throws light on the director's cinematic influences. The action here is intercut with Sergio Leone-like extreme close-ups of Sanjay Dutt's eyes, and the sound design employs slow-motion audio, amplifying the effect of the punches thrown in the fight. Just one example where Gupta crafted something that not only looked cool, but also felt ahead of its time in mainstream Hindi cinema. This is Himanshu, and you're listening to the Love of Cinema podcast. But before moving on, an important reminder. If you enjoy organic conversations centered on Indian cinema, Love of Cinema podcast was created for people just like you. So if you enjoy the pod, please do consider supporting the show. Love of Cinema podcast is my passion project. And with every episode, I've attempted to create something that cinephiles will continue to find value, not just today, but over time as well. If you find value in the conversations on the pod, please do consider supporting the show. Your support will help me continue creating content with shelf life for fans of Indian cinema everywhere. You'll find a link to support the show in the show notes. You can also support the show directly from the podcast website. It's fast, it's easy, and your support is greatly appreciated. Also, if you like the episode, please share the episode on social media, as that will help other people discover the podcast. Coming back to today's episode, besides its raw coolness, Aatish also scores on multiple other fronts. It's probably one of the most popular bromance movies of all time. Baba and Nawab duo is one for the ages, if you ask me. The film's got terrific dialogue, great music, and captures early 90s Mumbai like few other films. It's Sanjay Gupta's debut film, made when he was in his early 20s. It's a pretty solid first film, especially given Gupta's age at the time of its making. As you can guess, I'm quite fond of this film. For today's episode, I invited three other folks who are equally fond of Aatish. I was delighted to have Avneesh Prashar, Vikram Bondal, and Saurabh Nair on this episode for jamming together on Aatish as the film turns 30. Quick intro of the three wonderful guests we have today. Vikram's a marketing executive by profession and movie maniac by passion, and he proudly proclaims no genre left behind. Saurabh is a content writer, and cinema, coupled with talking about cinema, is his passion. Avneesh is an IT executive who is a die-hard Aatish fan. He has lost count of how many times he has watched the film, but is fairly certain that 7 of those countless times happened to be in cinemas during the film's theatrical run. Without further delay then, let's get on with Feeling the Fire. Here goes. Hey guys, how's everybody doing?
Hey, doing
Awesome.
great. How are you, Himanshu?
Great.
Guys, I'm so excited to have you guys on the pod today. We're going to talk about Aatish, Feel the Fire. Would you believe it? It's been 30 years since we first felt the fire. So, it's a film that I really love. I was probably around 12 years old when Aatish came out. And I really enjoyed it back then. But guess what? I still enjoyed as much. So even after 30 years. So that's the magic of that film. And if I remember correctly, Aatish was released during the monsoon of 1994. That also saw release of other 90s smash hits like Mora, Hum Aapke Hai Kaun, 1942, A Love Story. And I also believe Vijay Path and Krantiveer. So, Aatish is one of those 90s films that had truckload of style, coolness to burn. I think it's a film that gets bromance right. Baba and Nawab duo, holds a special place in our hearts. Sanjay Gupta's first film, peak action era Sanjay Dutt, solid action drama with lot of heart, lot of great music. And yes, it borrows, from A Better Tomorrow, State of Grace. But I would argue that at least on two occasions, it comes out front in comparison with those two movies. But more about that later. But what are your guys' first memories of Atish, and how do you look at this film 30 years since?
So, if I can start, I was privileged enough to watch the trial about 3 months before the film released because the film's editor, Mr. Afaf Hussain, who is sadly no longer with us, he was part of our family almost. And he invited us for the trial. And I very vividly remember being completely blown away by the film. I mean, those visuals, the dialogue, the styling. I mean, for months afterwards, I tried to wear a ganji with a coat like Sanjay Dutt used to. Obviously, it takes a special personality to carry that off, but it impact the film had on me. And when I went back home, I called up all my friends and I couldn't stop raving about the film. And then when the film released, I took them all for first day, first show at Gaiety Galaxy Cinema in Bandra, which was the place to be in the pre-multiplex era. And one of my friends loved it so much that we ended up watching the film 7 days in a row at the same cinema. I mean, we were college students, we had a lot of time on our hands, but that was the impact I still remember the film had on me. The current versions of the film available on various platforms have a few scenes missing, have a couple of songs missing, but I was lucky enough to see the whole film. So that memory has vividly stayed with me till today.
Yeah, unfortunately, the print on YouTube, it's a great print in terms of resolution and audio. But one of the prints that I watched, there are two prints, and one of the prints that I watched 2 days ago, that doesn't have the opening credit sequence, which is great. By the way, I'm a big fan of that opening credit sequence, the monochrome sequence, where Tanuja takes the kids to Ajit and all that. So yeah, the prints on YouTube are a bit shady. But how about you guys, Saurabh and Vikram?
Yeah, so Aatish, I saw when I was 5 or 6 years old. So Aatish came around 94, I guess. So I was 3 years old that time. I saw it in 97, 98, late 90s. One of my neighbor, he used to have these bootleg VCRs of these movies, all the 90s, early 90s, mid 90s, and recent one. Recent to this is like 97, 98 movies he used to rent and he used to show us. Like we three, four friends were there. And this guy, he's like senior to us. So he used to ask me to out into movie like that. He used to show us all these action movies because we used to love action movies. Sanjay Dutt, Sunil Shetty, Ajay Devgan, Sunny D, all these were our favorites. And what he used to do that he used to show us foreign movies also in Hindi dub. So interestingly, I saw Aatish and Better Tomorrow simultaneously. And I loved both. I enjoyed both. I enjoyed the uh, bromance of Nawab and this guy, Baba, Nawab and Baba. So yeah, this was like action movie and the bromance. Then Dil Dil, the song. That is my favorite Mauritius song, Dil Dil. My favorites are not Chura Ke Dil Mera or Bazigar or Bazigar. My favorite or Sanam, that Hum movie song, Govinda and Sripad. So that is not my favorite. This is my top favorite song.
Hum song is
And
my
Jolly
favorite, but
Cooker,
I think Dil Dil is up there too. Yeah.
yeah, top five. Number one will be Dil Dil. The rest others are like top like two, three, four. So yeah, so this is my Aatish memory. Watching Aatish and Better Tomorrow like a double feature.
Yeah, so like I said, when I was just 6 years old when I discovered this movie, I remember coming home from school, while having lunch, I'd watch TV, and my favorite channel back then was ATN because it used to show all these songs and trailers of upcoming movies and all. And I remember even back then, um, I mean, I'll come back to a more, what do you say, macro level examination of things later when we get into the deep podcasty mood. But right now, my first memory is even back then compared to other movies, this movie, the trailer, the way the song like Dil 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 was shot and all, it looked so different. There was this very polished. I mean, there's a lot of energy to it, but it's also very polished. Because I remember feeling the same way when I saw how Jadoo Teri Nazar from Dar was shot the previous year. You could make out that uh, this is a director who is taking his own time with each shot. Like he knows that okay, this has got to look good. This ain't like bas gana baj raha hai, chalo kuch shoot karte. It's not like that. So that was something that really struck me back then as a kid. And of course, I would end up watching the movie like in bits and pieces on cable when it used to come. It used to our cable operator used to show it on the typical uh, with that time logo in the corner and all. And that is like one of my favorite memories. Like if I saw the time logo, I'd get happy because it meant either an Akshay Kumar or a Sanjay Dutt or a Sunil Shetty movie would be coming up, with a lot of Mardhad and all that. And these movies also had titles that sounded so bhari bharkam. Like there's Aatish Feel the Fire, there's Hum Hai Bemisal, there's Elan, and you listen to all these names and you're like, you get goosebumps immediately. Like, okay, you're in for a fun time. Cut to maybe 2008, 2009. This is the time where Mossar Bear used to exist in the market and is responsible for a massive part of my movie collection. I used to go to Reliance Timeout and generally see what all movies are there, and I see all these movies like. And back then, if you remember, one VCD of Mossar Bear used to be like I think 29 rupees. I go berserk buying it, like proper. Kya bolte? It's a Diwali evening. There's a 50% off sale. I think I bought stuff worth 5K, which is a lot considering one VCD is 28 bucks and one DVD is 50 bucks. The security guard, he sees the bill, he's like this, he's just seeing it and भैया पूरा दुकान लिए है का. But after that, I think we had a long Diwali vacation. So I'm just sitting and watching it. Aatish, well, that was like probably the first time I watched the whole thing from start to finish, like properly. And even now, that experience stays with me. Like, okay, this is a solid action drama.
Yeah, those are great memories, guys. While we are on Sanjay Gupta, like Vikram brought it up, he definitely had an eye for style, action, and also music. And I think Avnish and you can chime in, but since Sanjay started his career under Pankaj Parashar, I think he gets a lot from him as well because Pankaj was always known for being he had that stylistic flourish. And you can see that in Sanjay Gupta's earlier films like Aatish, Ram Shastra, and they were heavily inspired from Hollywood films or Hong Kong cinema. But he always was able to add something of his own. And like I said, I have a couple of examples from Aatish that I will talk about later. That I think he has in fact done better than A Better Tomorrow and State of Grace. Some people will lynch me for this, but I that's what honestly I feel like. And maybe again I'm biased because that's where I saw these scenes for the first time. So before I discovered A Better Tomorrow or A State of Grace, but I really
This
think
is a
that
safe space. This is a safe space. We are open to say that we like Bollywood more than the Hollywood inspirations. Shamelessly, एकदम बेशरम होके बोलने का.
absolutely, 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 absolutely. And just one more thing, guys, I want to add before I again give it back to you guys. But recently, when I watched Animal, And I thought the climax fight, between Bobby and Ranbir, where the shirts come off, that was so Sanjay Gupta, man. I mean, that has to be, I don't know if that's, Wanga's kind of, hat tip to Sanjay Gupta, but I'm just guessing. But I just think that, when I first saw that scene in the theater, I thought, if Sanjay Gupta was making that film, he would have had the same scene. So, it's like on most of those filmmakers today, who probably like us, have grown up watching 80s and 90s movies. Sanjay Gupta's early films are definitely a looming kind of influence.
Yeah, I think absolutely. The one thing I think that sets him apart beyond the stylistic flourishes, etc., is his drive. Because he walked up to Mr. Pankaj Parashar at the age of 16 when he had just finished his 10th standard, and he said, "I want to be an assistant." So then my uncle directed him to my father, who was the executive producer on Karamchand, and my father told him to come the next day to the sets, and that's how he started. And within 1 year of Karamchand, he was almost doing chief assistant duties on Jalwa, and he was 17 or 18 at the time. And everybody who saw him, everybody who met him, and I am about maybe 8, 9 years younger than him, but everyone who met him knew that he is going to achieve something in life someday. And I wasn't surprised when I saw Aatish, when I heard rather that Sanjay Gupta at the age of 23 is directing a major film for Sippy Films, because we always had that feeling in our family that he is going to achieve a lot in his life. The stylistic flourishes also come from being a huge, he's also a huge Vijayanand fan. Vijayanand is his favorite director. And as you know, Vijayanand was the master of taking and the master of song picturization, which I think he's imbibed from there. But his credit is entirely his. He has really worked on his craft throughout his life. And to make a film as polished as Aatish at 24 is, I think, a remarkable achievement. I really do.
It's a terrific first film. I mean, just overall, it's a terrific first film. And of course, he had all the like the A-list actors and everything, and he had probably the biggest banner at that time, GP Sippy. But for that film to be his first film, I mean, it speaks volumes, I think. Guys, the dialogues of Aatish, Avnish, you said that you know all of them by heart, so I'm going to hold you to that now. One of the memes, Aatish memes is Nawab Akele Akele, right? I mean, that's everywhere. But there is another dialogue. That dialogues are, by the way, by Kamlesh Pandey, the great Kamlesh Pandey, who has also been on the podcast, and who wrote Tezab, and he wrote dialogues for Jalwa. He wrote dialogues for a couple of Subhash Ghai films. So he's a great legend, of course. But the dialogue that I really like from Aatish is ये माउथ ऑर्गन और ये गन दोनों में एक ही लोहा लगता है ना फिर भी दोनों में कितना फर्क है and that's a great dialogue, man. It's I mean, it has that masala strand to it, but it also is somewhat deep. So I thought that's a nice blend of both, kind of keeping the mainstream as well as a little deeper layer to it.
But I felt the Kader Khan dialogues were written by Kader Khan. I felt like as an audience, as a viewer.
Could be, man. Could be. I don't know. Right.
Didn't
The,
say
the
you.
credits say Kamlesh
Legend say
Pandey,
you.
but it
Okay,
could be
you.
that Kader Khan did, write his lines.
It felt like that Kader Khan is like he wrote those. You'll say you.
And what a great character that is. It's like a friend, philosopher, kind of a guy
But
who's
Kader
running that
Khan's
castle.
Kader Khan's character felt like David in Rishikesh Mukherjee's films. David.
It is. Yeah, yeah. It has that flavor to it. And Kader Khan, you guys know I'm a big fan of Kader Khan, of his writing as well as acting. And man, he breathes so much soul into that film in Aatish. And I'm so glad that he has a lot of scenes. I mean, it's not like a character, that just shows up once in a while, but it's throughout the film, and it kind of carries the film to some extent. So yeah, that character is tremendous. But what other dialogues, guys? What dialogues are you really a sucker for?
For me, the the first Aditya Pancholi is one of his first dialogues in the beginning of the movie. That itself sort of sets the tone. When they go and they sprinkle petrol everywhere, and Sanjay Dutt's Baba's about to light everything on fire, and Aditya Pancholi in that typical Bombay Tapori style, he goes, "Hey Baba, ये आग एकदम खड़ूस चीज है क्या?" That you see that and you're like, okay, you kind of get the mood, like, okay, this is the zone in which this movie is going. Although the dialogue before that has a nice homoerotic context to it. क्या body है तेरा बाप? Although, but then most Hindi movies, at least back then, the bromance element of it used to be very demonstrative. And I mean, you see it even between Indian men on the road. Like you see men, holding hands and walking and all without, it looking odd or weird. So this is just, go with the flow. And to add to what Saurabh was saying, I'm dead sure that it's not just Kader Khan who wrote the dialogues. I'm dead sure he would have written it before the scene. He would have just walked on to set and, full style, he would have surveyed everything. And in that nice, heavy, high, Bharkam voice of his, he would be, dialogue likhu, khud ka dialogue likhu. And he would have, written something and on the spot, he would have cracked it. Because I remember reading in the trivia somewhere, or I think one of your previous guests, Dipta Kirti, Calcutta Chromosome, he mentioned this in his blog about Loha, which is another, masala guru movie, that he doubts that Kader Khan was hired for that movie just so that he could write the dialogues on the set while also acting, two for the price of one. So I'm sure that even here, he would have just walked on to set, he would have seen the mood and, okay, chalo, kuch deep likhta hu, lekin it should make people laugh as
Yeah,
Oh,
Kader
what
Khan had
I'm
some great dialogues in the movie. I remember there's a scene where, once Baba comes to his cafe, after getting an earful from his mother, and he says, "मैं तो खाना खा के आया हूँ." And Kader Khan says something like, "क्या खा के आए हो? जिल्लत के शब्द हो." Yeah, something. And then also when, Sanjay Dutt comes back from prison and he says, "Kader bhai, Nawab kahan hai?" And he says, "अगर तुम्हारे कानों में ताकत है और आंखों में हिम्मत है, तो जाके देख सकते हो," or something like that. And that, those kind of lines, not only Kader Khan was great at writing them, but he was so great at delivering them, right? I mean, it like packs a double punch when it's coming from him, the man himself.
So the dialogue after what Vikram said when Aditya Pancholi in the beginning says, "ये आग बहुत खड़ूस चीज है, तू मौत के साथ रेस लगाना चाहता है." So then when Sanjay Dutt says, "जिंदगी जीने का मजा तब आता है तो जब मौत के हाथ में हाथ डाल के दौड़ा जाए." So that for me is the dialogue of the film. It encapsulates the whole film. It encapsulates Sanjay Dutt's character, and it's repeated again towards the end when Shakti Kapoor throws the briefcase to Sanjay Dutt and says there's a bomb in it. So if you open it, you'll be blown to bits. And he says it again. So for me, that was a dialogue that just blew my mind completely. Another thing, honestly, that blew my mind was the way they shot Bombay. They shot Mauritius, of course, all the great locations. But I mean, the way they shot Naz in Naz restaurant in two different sequences.
Oh man, I love it.
Brilliant. Absolutely mind-blowing. Yep.
I got to know that is that restaurant's name is Cafe Mas through Avneesh, because I asked on Twitter, tagging Avneesh and you also, I guess, Himanshu.
Yes,
So
yes.
Avneesh told me this is Cafe Mas.
Yes, yes. That's an old vintage place that's defunct now. That's where the gallery is now. I think it's a viewing gallery. But yeah, sorry, Avnish, go ahead.
No, unfortunately demolished now because there was a 99-year lease and it expired and all of that. But it is an iconic place. It's the place where my parents spent most of their dating life before getting married. So that's how vintage the place is.
Yeah, Cafe Naz, I mean, I'm sure you could write at least a small booklet on it because there's so many films and iconic scenes that are shot there. The scene in Shan where Bachchan is trying to make his move on that woman. That's shot over there. There is a scene in Mora.
Ashiki.
Yeah, yeah. It was like almost like a must, film location for 80s and 90s. But the Bombay of 90s, Avnish, since you brought that up in Aatish, it's awesome. The Cafe Nas, then especially their home, the Warsaw home that has been also a common stay in most of the films. That the Warsaw of old, the old Hotel C Princess at Juhu, and of course the old Haji Ali walkway and all that. And so I think the locations are just to die for in
And
Aatish.
that scene where they cut off Nawab's leg is just outstandingly shot. And I mean,
Absolutely.
it shows that you can do a lot of stuff within the city as well if you have a fresh eye to show locations.
Yeah, all those scenes are great, and we'll talk about the scenes more. In fact, if this is a great segue to the scenes, but I'll let you guys go ahead first. So, what are some of your favorite moments and scenes from the film? There are so many.
Yeah, no, I was my favorite is the opening sequence, opening of introduction of Baba and Nawaz. Sorry, Nawab, no doubt. That and talking about technicality, like that scene amazes me because Sanjay Gupta was so young, like 23 years old, and hats off to the editor also. Oh, sorry, I forgot editor's name.
Afaq
Avneesh,
Hussain.
can you? Afaq Hussain's editing is brilliant in that opening sequence. If you see when that flashback, Sepaya told flashback gets over, and the police officer goes down, the constable goes down, and then from that constable you see the door, and
It
then
cuts to
Nawab
present.
and Baba comes, and then when he Aditya Pancholi and Nawab opens the door, then you see cut. He's opening the light, like switch on the light. So that is quite brilliant for that young age. Like you're shooting it so stylishly. And then when he says that dialogue, Sanjay Dutt says the dialogue, and then the blazes the that go down or something, and then they run. That sequence is awesome, no doubt. That is one of my favorites.
Yeah, the entire opening credit sequence is great. I love like from the very moment that the young Nawab and young Baba kind of stab Bridge Gopal, and then Tanuja takes them to Ajit, the local don, and it's like a small ode to vintage 70s cinema in like a matter of like 90 seconds or so. And then it kind of cuts to the present, where they're grown up, and then we have that 100-yard dash from State of Grace. And but we'll talk about that. But Vikram, you wanted to mention yours, so I'll let you go first.
My favorite scene from Aatish is a slightly hatke one. It's the scene where we realize what a big villain Shakti Kapoor actually is. This is after Baba has been sent to jail and Nawab's leg has been cut off, and he shows his true colors to Ajit, and it's his last scene in the movie. Because till then, and the thing is, see, even otherwise, Shakti Kapoor as a villain, no matter what heinous thing he does on screen, you sort of see him as this comic figure in most of his movies. But here, for those few minutes, he actually looks evil. He removes his knife, he puts it around Ajit's throat, and he's explaining his whole character motive and everything. And you can see that look of fear in Ajit's eyes. Like I like to imagine that he was improvising it, and Ajit is like, "Ye londa kya kar raha hai?" in his head. But genuinely looks scary in that scene, where he finally loses it. He stabs him through the heart and he yells king, and that lightning flash on his face, right? The way that's done, now with hindsight, now you would see it's like a precursor to a villain like, the Joker, where this guy is unpredictable. You dismiss him at your own peril. And that is a scene that really, even back then, like the first time I watched it, and even today when I watch it, that those 3 minutes are like in the movie, because one thing I've always felt is that in most Hindi movies, and this is something I see a lot in South movies as well, the villain is normally seen as the villain is there just to, increase the heroism of the hero. But here, you see the villain and he's genuinely menacing, and you feel, okay, this guy is not somebody who just get whacked in the end. He's gonna give tough competition to the hero. And that is something that, again, added to, Atish's appeal for me. And as for the pre-credit sequence, Every time I see it, I close my eyes. I can imagine the smell of Old Spice.
Yes, yes. We got to talk about the background music. That's a good one, Vikram. But yeah,
Yeah,
because
talking
there's
about
so
background
much.
score.
Yeah, go
Sorry,
ahead.
talking about background score. The transformation of Shakti Kapoor is with Rocky's music.
Yeah,
Tan,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
tan.
This is a movie where you will find the music of Terminator. You will find
yes.
1492 Conquest of Paradise. In fact, that's the first time I heard that music in the title sequence.
Mm.
And
Yes.
then, just few years ago, I realized that there is a piece of background score which accompanies when Baba and Nawab are like out on a mission, like when they're going to get
They are going to
Pakia.
assassinate Pakya. Yeah.
Yeah. And that thing is essentially a riff on the pan flute from Once Upon a Time in America.
Mm.
And I didn't realize that many years ago, but I just realized that few years ago. But the way that works, it works so well. that, these are
And
all
one more
classics, but
thing.
you remember them from this movie.
One more, they
Same thing.
use Blade Runner's music also, love music.
Yeah.
Blade Runner.
Yes, yes, yes. No, the same thing. For me, it applies to this thing. Agnipath and
Yeah.
Khuda Gawa. There's a
Yes.
lot of 80s and 90s
Yeah.
movie music, Hollywood music, background music that is used in these movies. But even today, when I hear it, I associate them with these movies, not the original Hollywood.
Same, Vikram.
Like for
Same.
example, in Khuda Gawa. Sorry for digressing, but in Khuda Gawa, Nagarjun, who was originally played by Sanjay Dutt in the movie, his opening scene, he's coming up with the gun and all with the sun in the background. That music is from a Ridley Scott movie called Black Rain. So, but even today, I listen to it and like first thing is, Khuda Gawa, ye Khuda Gawa wala music hai. And I mean, now all this is not possible because thanks to Netflix, thanks to the increased reach of Hindi movies, you can't do something. But sometimes I admire how brazen these filmmakers were in lifting stuff from Hollywood and all. It's like so bindas, like kya hi pata chalega unhe. But in a way, that adds to the the fun. It adds to that appeal of that particular era.
And a big chunk of the nostalgia that we enjoy so much today is partly due to that, like what you said, Vikram. Like, same here. I mean, for me, I enjoy Jean-Michel Jarre's music as much as when I listen to it in Agnipath, than when I listen to the original Oxygen. And the same thing, when I was watching Aatish, I mean, that theme, the Conquest of Paradise, the theme of that in the title sequence, man, that's cinema for me. I mean, it's like crazy. It's crazy how that sequence still works like 30 years after its release.
See, I think 94 was the year where the 90s actually touched Bollywood. Because sometimes when I look back, I mean, when I'm bored on a Saturday night, or let's say there are nights where, I go out drinking with the chaps and I come home after a few beers, I can't watch anything heavy. I need to watch some masala Bollywood, and I do that. I go on YouTube, I go into Goldmines Telefilms or NH Studios or DRJ Studios, and anything that catches my eye, I watch. What I realize is 94 is the year. All these movies that you mentioned, Aatish, Mohara, etc. These are the movies that have that 90s wala feel to them, where you feel that okay, we are in a new decade now, because most of the movies from the previous 3 years sort of felt like leftovers from the previous decade. Especially because when you look back and if you go through most trivia sections of movies from that era from IMDb, what you realize is a lot of these movies, it will like they started shooting in 1984, but it released in 1992. And it's crazy how commonplace this was back then. Like, there's no freshness. And in Aatish also, if you see, most 90s Sanjay Dutt movies, you can make out that in every scene his hairstyle changes. But somehow in this movie,
It's
that
consistent.
continuity is somehow maintained. So this movie and all, it shows that, okay, these are kids who are in the 90s. These are, what do you say, new voices. I mean, you have your Sanjay Gupta, you have your Suraj Barjatia, you have Abbas Mastan, you have Rajiv Rai, etc. So that is something I really find interesting.
So just to add to that, background music, yes, was inspired is the word I think we used back in the day from a lot of places. But I think the way it was used, like Vikram said, that you think of, the Hindi film before you think of the original. And there's one sequence where Sanjay Dutt and Shakti Kapoor go to meet Gulshan Grover, where he double crosses and Sanjay Dutt gets arrested. So that background score is taken from Passenger 57, which I don't think a lot of people realize is the title score of Passenger 57. But it just blew my mind because when I saw Passenger 57, I didn't remember that score. But when I saw it used in that scene, it instantly stuck with me. So, yeah, I mean, it may not be original, but it's effective, and nothing in life is original, to be honest. Uh, but coming to my favorite scene in the film, of course, Nawab Akele is pretty much everybody's uh, favorite scene in the film. But there's a very small scene in front of a temple which they've shot in Mauritius, where Aditya Pancholi tells the Sanjay Dutt that you are like Bholenath, you're like Shiv Bhagwan. And Sanjay Dutt starts laughing. So he says, "Nahi, what am I saying wrong? Didn't Shiv Bhagwan also take all the poison himself and give Amrit to everybody else?" So Sanjay Gupta was actually questioned about that in an interview. He said, "I know that scene could have caused, a little bit of uneasiness or controversy, maybe a lot more in today's day and age. But he said that's why I ended it with Sanjay Dutt laughing and telling Aditya Pancholi, तुझ पे भोलेनाथ की बूटी चढ़ गई." But it just shows the regard and respect one friend, the love one friend has for the other. And there's another scene where Aditya Pancholi tells Sanjay Dutt that भाई एक रिश्ता होता है, खून का रिश्ता, दोस्त हम खुद चुनते हैं when they are separating. And he says, I'll choose my brother. I don't want to work with Shakti Kapoor. So those two scenes for me really stood out as examples of what, friendship is all about. And like I said, I remember every scene from the film, so I can go on.
Yeah, there are two scenes that I'm a big fan of. One you already mentioned, Avnish. That's the Nawab Akele Akele. And, I want to add this here, since we are saying that, so much of those films were inspired from other films and the background music and all that. But, that scene where Baba comes looking for Nawab and Nawab is having his meal, sitting inside the parking structure, eating out of the newspaper after a hard day's work and after being, kind of belittled by Shakti Kapoor earlier. The famous Nawab Akele Akele line comes. And that scene is very, very similar to the one from A Better Tomorrow with Mark and Ho, the counterparts, Baba and Nawab. But hear me out. I like the Aatish scene a lot more than the one from A Better Tomorrow. And here's why I say that. In Aatish, when Nawab hears Baba's voice, when he says Nawab, it takes him a few seconds to process that Baba is back, to gather his emotions, before he can muster the courage to look up at Baba. And it's so nicely done, both by Pancholi and Sanjay Gupta. And in A Better Tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken, I think Mark looks up at Ho right away when he calls out his name. And I think that's the difference, between Aatish and A Better Tomorrow. And that's why I think that sequence works a lot better for me, because it packs in that emotional core so much that, you really feel, all torn up. You really feel for Nawab that he doesn't want, Baba to see him like that. And it really comes across the screen. And, that's why I thought that scene, again, is an example that's, if you want to call it inspired from the Vishnu, it's definitely the same scene. But I think Sanjay Gupta has done it so much better. I mean, I will say that again.
But then in the 90s, one thing that I really liked is that even though, a lot of these movies are inspired from, the Far East or from Hollywood, etc., our guys used to add this very nice, emotional punch to it. They added this very desi tadka to it. So, so much so that even when you watch it today, I mean, you notice certain things like now it's like a trend on Twitter where, any movie completes 25 years, 30 years, people will suddenly go berserk. And for a minute, you're like, why are we celebrating 25 years of this movie? But but
I do
this
that a lot,
normally,
by the way.
no, I was actually remembering you that because I think you mentioned BB number one, and I'm like, okay, we are celebrating a silver jubilee of this movie as well. But generally, what happens is, now, for example, I watched Bazigar recently after a long time. Aatish, I revisited last night as revision for today's recording, and I keep revisiting movies from the early and mid 90s. Like for example, Phool or Patthar, Salman Khan and Ravina, which is a favorite. There are some scenes, a lot of these movies may seem dated at times. You watch it, you're like, "Arey yaar, aise," because now we are used to a totally different, what you'd call cinematic grammar. But even then, there is something in these movies that make you want to revisit them every now and then. There is that emotional connection. There's that emotional punch. There'll be like one simple scene in it which you watch and you feel it's not just what do you say? You feel satisfied. Like, okay, this hits the spot, which sometimes you don't get in more recent movies. And it's not because we are addicted to nostalgia or anything, but these movies were just written differently. These movies, the acting, etc., everything. There's a lot more conviction compared to what we see now. And unfortunately, that is the truth because if you see anything recent, even when they try to recreate that period feel in, let's say, a web series or something, okay, they try to recreate the 90s. Maybe the look in a very sanitized manner they can recreate, but that feel, that emotion, you don't feel drawn there. You don't end up there. You don't feel transported there. That is the sad part of it.
Yeah,
And
definitely. The
talking
emotional
about
connect is there, and that's thanks to the story, the writing, like you said, Vikram, and also the characters. Because, like in any film or in any novel, the novel works or the film works if the characters, connect with you, right? You start feeling something for the characters, and then you kind of, immerse yourself in the story. And I think all of these films, maybe we don't talk about them in the same breath as some of the modern classics or anything like that, but still, I mean, they had that emotional connect. That connect between the characters was there, and that's why they live inside you in your memory somewhere. So the nostalgia is obviously there, but there is also this reason, you as you rightly pointed out. So there's this other scene, guys, that I want to talk about, which I'm a big fan of. And I'm sure that you guys probably also dig this scene. But that's the action sequence at Cafe Nas. After Vishwajit Pradhan starts eve teasing Nisha, Baba and Nisha leave the cafe. Baba drops Ravina back at her Bandra residence. And then he returns to the cafe alone. And now, man, the slow mo ensues, right? The wristwatch comes off, the tie comes off. Baba steps out of the car. He takes out his blazer, he flings it back into the car, walks up the stairs. And Vishwajit Pradhan and his crew see that he's back. And then all of a sudden, Sanjay Gupta goes straight up Sergio Leone with those extreme close up of Sanjay Dutt's eyes, intercut with shots of Vishwajit Pradhan's crew arming themselves with ketchup and beer bottles. And man, I love that sequence. I absolutely love that sequence. Even 2 days ago, when I was watching that, I kind of rewound that portion and watched it twice again. But it's again so nicely done. People will call it cheesy or corny, now. But man, that works like wonders. And Sanjay Dutt has that personality to pull that off. So that's also an added boon. But that's one of my
And
favorites.
another small thing. Now in movies, in action movies, even in Bollywood, the gunshots sound more real. Whereas back then, they had these two or three stock sounds for every. Like a pistol had a slightly more high pitched sound, and a revolver had a longer sound, and a rifle had a slightly more booming sound. And all machine guns, be it an AK-47, be it a normal Sten gun, or be it even a Uzi or a MP5, somehow they all sounded the same in Bollywood movies. And even in Aatish, most of all the pistols, even though they are of different makes, they all sound same. Only in the end, I think the guns, the machine guns that they use in the end, they have slightly more distinct sounds, which, I mean, looks like Sanjay Gupta probably, like much as said, अरे यार इसका थोड़ा अलग अलग रखना चाहिए, मतलब इसका थोड़ा वेटेज अलग है बोल के.
Yeah, and I'm a big sucker for those action sequences where not only is the video in slow mo, but even the audio. Where so the audio goes like ha ha ha, and that so it kind of adds that added point to it because even the audio they have slowed down a little bit, so it's not like dishum, but it's like and that, and so I love those kind of sounds.
but if you see the action sequence, that action sequence is built up so beautifully that before that the scene between Sanjay Dutt and Ravina happens, and as a viewer you will forget about that thing that the Vishwajit has taunted Sanjay Dutt, or he will come back. like you don't expect, because that scene is so stretched, that romantic sequence scene.
And that's
After
again
that,
great
when
characterization, right? Because, Baba is like
exactly
a gentleman, so he wants to make sure that the lady is safe first. And then he's going to come
after he
back
gets
and
into
kind
the
of screw
car,
with this.
then background score changes.
Yeah.
And once the action starts, once he reaches up back to the restaurant, there's no background music there. There's just an echoing sound of every punch, every bottle breaking.
Exactly.
And
Yes.
it was so different for that time because action films normally had loud background music to hammer home the fact that it's an action sequence. But this one had nothing. And that was phenomenal, I think.
Yeah, yeah. And you guys already talked about the scene where, or did we talk about the chase scene where they chase Pakia, on foot? And probably that's the best chase until Black Friday, Baba and Nawab chasing him, tossing the sword to each other from Worldly Seaface to Flora Fountain. Man, they covered a lot of distance, I must say. But, that's again so nicely done.
That
And
was the first half marathon that they ran. Before the half marathon became a thing.
another first for Aatish. Yeah.
I'd like to add one more point. Since Vikram was saying that our guys, they add a little bit emotional quotient in our films. And he also spoke about gunshots. So this reminded me of that scene where he surrenders, where Baba surrenders. And before that, he thinks that flashback montage sequence comes, which the same scene is there in Better Tomorrow also. But the difference is here, after after each gunshot, that montage sequence will come, like that flashback will come in Aatish. But in Better Tomorrow, it's normal montage. So
Good point,
that
Saurabh.
was
Yes, yes, yes. Good point.
And one more thing, I mean, this is something I've noticed. I think the mid and late 90s were, probably the last decade where they used to properly shoot in the middle of the city in, proper locations. Like, because uh, I miss those scenes where, यहाँ पे action हो रहा है, and here there's a big bead of people just standing and staring. I mean, uh, it's funny enough when it's a song sequence, but when it's an action sequence, it's equally funnier because frankly, that over here, if an actual ladai happens, people will randomly jump it. But here, it's so disciplined, so nicely, ekdam discipline mein they're standing and watching things happen and all. But now, obviously, shooting a movie like that in Bombay, in the heart of the city, and all is next to impossible because I don't think you'll get the permissions in the first place and all.
Yeah.
But I think the 90s were the last decade, maybe a few movies in the 2000s, but otherwise that general trend. Because I remember I watched Bluffmaster and Tushan. And after a long time, it felt like, oh, ये तो शहर में कहीं पे, somewhere in a recognizable spot they've shot, these movies. See, Black Friday you can't count because that was proper, secret may they shot it. But here, it's like proper scenes in the middle of the city because we don't see that now. Now it's all they show them random place and we are supposed to believe it's Mumbai and also, it's quite sad.
Yeah, I think, and unfortunately, all the 1993 terrorist attacks changed a lot of that because, it's not that easy now to shoot something with, people running around with swords or anything like that, especially if it's like a long shot or something like that, so that kind of changed the whole equation too. But one more scene, guys, before we move on from the scenes. And that scene is when Nawab is ambushed at Haji Ali. भीख क्या देता है नवाब भीख तो अब तू मांगेगा and I love that scene again. It's slow motion and all the attackers kind of stand up, throw their hands up in the air. The cloths they had been using to conceal their hatchets fly off with the wind, revealing their hatchets. Man, but again, it's a scene that if you just took out from the film, it will still work. Because it has that so much, it is so dramatic, it is so cinematic, and even not just the location, but the way that it has been conceived, the way that it has been shot. And I think there are like so many scenes like these, right? Like when there's somebody's attacked near Haji Ali or, Worli Seaface or something like that. But the one from Aatish, I think it really stands out. And again, I mean, that it's a key scene in the film. So maybe that's why it has that added impact. But I love that scene as well.
So that scene for me, I think that was Ravi Devan's mastery. Ravi Devan was the action director. He also started his career with Jalwa, so that's when Sanjay Gupta and he, met for the first time, and he did Parinda as well, and a lot of films pre and post that. But that scene, the scene where they chase Pakya, I think those scenes are evident of a mastery of craft that all the technicians on the film displayed. And again, pick up other films from '94 and compare them just visually with Aatish. There's a world of a difference, I feel. And that scene was, although I think the background score in that scene was the same as Dial, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know where the origin from that is, but Dial had the same background.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
It works brilliantly, but that scene. Especially it ends with the cutting of the leg, and it's a shocking moment in the film.
Another thing I just wanted to point out, good thing Avneesh mentioned Ravi Devan. I think he was one of the first action directors who made action not only stylish, but there was also an element to realism to them. Because in Jalwa, in Parinda, like you mentioned, when a punch lands, you feel it. It's not like that standard dishum dishum wala punch where ek punch mara and the guy goes flying and all. This is like proper fist fight, real kind of thing where you can feel that you feel the shock of that punch, and he brought a kind of brutality to it. But again, it is shot in a very aesthetic manner, because I remember Ravi Devan also did the action for Saudagar. And Saudagar has some really stunning sequences. So, I mean, this is a guy who, really knows how to make the most of, whatever resources he had. And all these movies, if you see, be it Parinda, be it Jalwa, be it Aatish, no matter how big a monitor you have, that big screen wala, you know that if you'd seen this movie on the big screen, you would have really, your hair would have stood on, and you would have probably gotten up from your seat and started clapping, started whistling, whatnot. And this is something that Aatish has. Even though it may not be the most perfect movie, Aatish may have a lot of moments where you just feel like fast forwarding through all that. But this is still a movie that you feel deserves a big screen experience, because a lot of scenes, it has that 70 wala thappa on.
I see. No, none of you want to bring up that steamy scene between Sanjay Dutt and Ravina as your favorite. So I was kind of waiting that one of you will give in, but since you aren't, I need to do the honors. But man, for a mainstream movie, I mean, that was pretty racy, for 1994. I wonder how they got all that past the censors, because I'm guessing that censors back then probably were even more, tougher.
I think they were more lenient then.
You think so? Yeah.
I was rewatching the film yesterday, and my wife happened to walk in just at the time that scene came. I mean, women have perfect timing. So I'm not in her good books currently. So I will not be commenting any more on that scene. But yeah, it was again a pretty cool and different scene from the normal romantic scenes of that era.
Definitely, yeah. It's racy, it's steamy, but it's a pretty bold scene for that time, like you said. And the music, man, how great is the music? I think it was Vikram who said that Dil Dil Dil. That's my favorite too. I mean, I love that song and just the visuals of it. It's a brilliantly shot song by Najib Khan, I think is the DOP. But Khate Hum Kasam is also pretty cool. It's like vintage Nadeem Shravan. But what do you guys make of the music? This had pretty decent music.
Even this thing, Ya Mustafa, Ya Dilruba.
That's a great song too.
Even that song has a lot of, because I remember there was some, I was too young to know why the controversy was, but
yeah. They changed it from,
change the title of it.
Yes. I think it was...
Same year, the same year, Sexy from Khudar was changed to Baby, Baby, Baby. And it sounded pretty awful, frankly.
But did you like, but if you have to choose Dekhta Hu Koi Ladki Hasi or Ya Dilruba, which one you would choose?
We'll keep that for the next podcast.
You're afraid this.
That I need to start a Patreon for that, Saurabh. So that...
So my favorite song from the film is actually something that's not there on any of the prints available today, as far as I know. It was a slow, melancholy song called Kaach Tum Mujhse Ek Baar Kaho, Tumko Mujhse Pyar Ho Gaya, which happens after Baba is released from jail and he's like thinking about Ravina. and this song plays in the background. It is an absolutely beautiful track, beautiful tune. But unfortunately, soon after the video prints and it came out on cable, that song went away. So I'm
Was
sure
it
not.
was it there in the theatrical cut?
It was, yes, it was in the theater.
And credits, it shows choreography by Farah Khan, Saroj Khan and Farah Khan. I was wondering which one is Saroj Khan's, which one is Farah Khan's.
I think Dil Dil
Because that,
looks like Farah Khan to me. I might be wrong, but I
yeah,
think
but
that
that
looks like Farah
pelvic
Khan.
thrust is there. In
Yeah,
Dil, that pelvic thrust is there.
yeah,
So
and
I
even
thought
that
it's
the
Saroj
whole
Khan.
thing with the sax and all that, like Farah Khan likes all that, like 80s music videos, MTV music videos and all that. So I'm guessing that that's where she gets that from. But yeah, I'm just guessing. But it's difficult. Avnish, do you have any insight into that as to which one was choreographed by whom?
No, not really sure. It's kind of been a mystery to me as well because that's a very unusual credit. Farah Khan and Saroj Khan on the same film didn't happen too often back then after Jo Jeeta Wahi Sikandar. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe that Ya Dilruba may have been Saroj Khan. I don't know. It's more of a typical Hindi film song. Their outfits were inspired by Shan, by Yama Yama, I think. The black sleeveless jacket and the white shirt and black pants they wear with a waistband. So I don't know, but it's a mystery, and I think somewhere that speaks to the film as well. That the songs flow with the situation of the film, take away from it.
But in Dil Dil, there's a sequence where Karishma is standing at ease and Atul Agnihotri is riding the bike 360 degree. That is Farah Khan style. Very stylish. It's Farah
Yeah,
Khan.
my guess would be that that song has been done by Farah Khan. That's just a guess. So I don't have any, legit information.
One more thing to add, even Dabu Ratnani's breakthrough was Aatish.
Yes, yes, he has done
And
the
that
stills. Yeah,
iconic Sanjay
yeah, yeah.
Dutt's photo shoot
Yeah,
was
I
done
still
by Dabu
remember. I mean,
Ratnani.
even today, if you Google some of the stills that shows up, if you do like Aatish images or scenes or something, are not actually scenes from the film, but they are publicity stills, and I think those stills were done by Ratnani. Guys, we got to talk about Sanjay Dutt and Aditya Pancholi, and this is like, this is. I think this movie is just before Sanjay Dutt went in prison, so in actual life. And I think this was like peak Sanjay Dutt like action era, where he really gets to do that, Chow Yun Fat kind of action hero thing. And so I was a big fan of Sanjay Dutt. I loved the Sanjay Dutt 2.0 after Munna Bhai as well, but I also like the 1.0 Sanjay Dutt, Khatarnak and, Mahanta and all these films. So, and then Pancholi, I mean, guys, you know, is this, first of all, is this Pancholi's most popular film? Is this the film that he is probably most known for?
I think so. I think so, and it is. As I was mentioning to you earlier in our conversation, that it's an unbelievably underrated performance because he didn't get into the mention for the awards or anything like that. But if you watch the film, it's not like he is he's playing second fiddle in terms of maybe screen time, etc. to Sanjay Dutt, but every scene that he had, he more than holds his own and sometimes steals the show. It's like you mentioned that the 2 second delay between him eating when he says Nawab Akele Akele and him looking up, that's brilliantly done. So I definitely think it's one of his best performances. I can't remember a better one from Aditya Pancholi. Uh, but it's definitely very, very underrated.
For me, I think Pancholi's best is funnily in a very similar zone to Aatish. Uh, of course, he plays a much darker role in it. This movie is called Mahasangra.
Oh, yeah,
It's a
yeah.
Mukul Anand
Mukul Anand film.
made
Yeah.
in
Chota Goda. Bada
Chota
Goda.
Goda. I came across this movie randomly, like as in this was, I think, when I finally got a Geo fiber connection at home, and I could watch movies, not Geo, sorry, BSNL fiber connection at home, and I could watch movies on YouTube without the buffering nonsense. One night, as always, मस्त दोस्त लोग के साथ बियर पी के आ गए एकदम मूड में चल कुछ मसालेदार देखते. And like आज कुछ मुकुल आनंद का कुछ देखते हैं. Then I realized, oh, there's a movie called Mahasangram and I haven't seen. Right from his entry scene, the guy eats everybody up. I mean, this is a movie that has Vinod Khanna, Govinda, Amjad Khan, etc. And here is this guy eating all of them up effortlessly. He just shows up, he has this really, he has this blade mustache and everything, and this very cool look, slightly long hair and all. And he speaks in that pakka tapori, I said, hey, kaat dalega, and he's so intense and so aggressive in it. And even this movie has a scene where somebody gets chopped up at Haji Ali. This time it's Shakti Kapoor. And I just forgot to mention one thing since we were talking about Gulshan Grover. Is it just me or was that makeup showing his damaged eye a little too realistic? Because every time he takes off his glasses, you're like, whoa.
They kind of overdid the prop.
And what's up with this Gulshan Grover's 90s thing? Like in every movie, his looks are different. He has one-liner in every film.
That's because he had to do something different. Yeah, poor guy. I mean, he was so much in demand. And
I think that
was
started
recently-
after Ram Lakhan, right? That
Yes.
one-liner thing. I think that started after Ram Lakhan. He became such
In
a
this, it's
craze.
Kismat.
No, and the thing with him is, I was reading his memoir, his autobiography, and what you realize is, compared to the kind of roles he did in movies, he is actually a very different person. He's a very thinking person, is what I gathered from his book. And what you realize is, this is a guy who wants to make an impact in every role that he did, because uh, he went through a very long period of struggle in the early 80s and all that, and at one point, this is something I got to know from IMDb's trivia section. He was kept because he was like a duplicate Kamal Hassan. Because if you remember early 80s Kamal Hassan and Gulshan Grover, that same thin mustache, that same curly hair, etc. So there was that slight resemblance between them and all. So, and the thing with Gulshan is he's really, really struggled to get to where he is. And I think he got his first break also with, after a lot of struggle. I think Shabana Azmi or someone did him a favor and introduced him to someone, and that's how he got his role in Mashal, I think. Yeah. But yeah, so what I realized is this is a guy who wanted to make an impact with every role. So he used to make an effort because he knew director will just say, हाँ तू villain है, कोई villain वाला काम कर. So you're like, चलो मैं कुछ अपना कुछ कर देता हूँ, like that.
Vikram, by the way, Mahasangram is Bijoy and Ambiyar's go-to comfort movie. I was talking with him during the podcast, and he said that's the movie that he puts on when he just wants to unwind and kind of take a break from shooting or something like that. It's a great movie. And going back to Pancholi, guys, I really like Pancholi, and like Avnish, you said, I think he's an underappreciated actor. I really like some of those early 90s Pancholi films like Sathi and Chor Aur Chand is another film that I like a lot. My favorite Pancholi performance, though, is something that came much later. That's in Chandan Arora's Striker, where he has a very small role, but he has absolutely killed it. And that's a piece of terrific casting coupled with a terrific performance. But yeah, Pancholi was so great in Aatish, and I keep on wondering if this is the movie, that he'll be remembered for, because Nawab and Baba and all those memes, and so they're like everywhere. So even like the current generation, they dig Nawab and Baba.
I have a question for everyone
That's
regarding
fine.
Nawab.
Yeah, carry on, sir.
Sorry, I have a question for everyone, for Himanshu, Avneesh, Vikram. I have a question regarding Nawab and Baba's bromance. I think Nawab was more in love with Baba than Baba in love with Nawab. Because Baba was more into Atul Agnihotri, brotherhood.
Well, the person that
Baba-
Baba was more into is Nisha. So after Nisha, it's Avi. Or probably after Nisha, it's probably his mother, then Avi.
Okay, now this podcast is getting juicy.
But there's a scene where Nawab says that तुम्हारे लिए तुम्हारा भाई है, मेरे लिए तो तुम ही हो बाबा.
That's true. Yeah. There is that great scene. Yeah. That's by Raspberry Rhinoceros, I think. It's in the
In fact,
back
tonight
on
after this
Juhu.
podcast is done, after we are done recording, there's another. It's almost like you could call it a sequel, a spiritual sequel to Aatish. There's a movie called Baghi of Aditya Pancholi and Sanjay Dutt. It's a remake of a lesser-known Robert De Niro movie called A Bronx Tale.
Yeah.
And even this movie is lesser known compared to this thing because apparently the title character is Inder Kumar, but then they figured, okay, Sanju Baba hai, to usko main character bana dete hai, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So
Was that a Sanjay Gupta production as well? I know he didn't direct that, but was that a
no,
Sanjay?
no. It's the same general, what do you say, actors and all that. But this came out, I think, maybe a year after Vastav.
Yes. Around 2000-ish. Yeah. Sorry, going back to what you were saying, Saurabh, I cut you in the middle. So, the bromance thing, right? Yeah, definitely. Because, Baba had so many people in his life. Nawab did not. So, Baba was the only person that he had to fall back on, except maybe Ajit. So, those were the only two people. And obviously, there is that, kind of current where Nawab always feels like, he's as good as a brother to Baba, but, he's never going to be the real brother, like Avi. So, that current is also there. But yeah, so to answer your question, probably yes. Nawab was more in love with Baba.
And sadly, when before Nawab dies, Nawab is talking about Baba and his importance to Atul Agnihotri character.
Yes.
After that, he dies.
Yeah.
So for him, Baba was more important than others. What's your take on that, Avneesh?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's nothing that we know about Nawab. I mean, we don't know his backstory. We know why Sanjay Dutt turns to crime and why all that happens. But when Sanjay Dutt, as a child in the opening monochrome sequence, asked Nawab to come with him to kill Brij Gopal, he comes rightly. He doesn't give a damn because he's ready to do, from that age, he's ready to do anything for his friend. And of course, yeah, he is. I mean, homoerotic insinuations aside, I mean, that's friendship. I mean, I love that bit about the film. And for a while, I used to tell, my best friends at that time, and, this is what we'll be like. Doesn't work in real life like that. But yeah, it's just a very well written, very well fleshed out romance in that film. And Sanjay Gupta brought Baba and Nawab back in Das Kahaniyan, in the last short Kahaniyan, where Sunil Shetty was Nawab and Sanjay Dutt continued to be Baba.
Love that story. Yeah.
Yeah, that was brilliant.
I think that is probably the best thing that he has done since Karte, in my opinion. Because, I'm more of a fan, like I said, of his 90s stuff. So, I even like Ram Shastra and all those movies. I mean, they had certain stylistic moments.
Even Hamesha has this charm to it. Like you watch it now, it's
definitely.
Like,
yes.
because
Hamesha was also very
yeah.
Totally. It's very high on
And,
that visual aesthetic quotient.
Coming back to everybody's favorite pre-credit sequence from Aatish, the kid playing young Nawab, Master Sumi, he also played young Shahrukh in Bazigar. But somehow I felt his resemblance to Aditya Pancholi was much more real. Like,
For sure.
क्या बोलते हैं? एकदम छोटा भाई दिखता है.
For
And
sure.
the guy playing young Baba, Shahrukh Barocha, I still remember him from the cult 90s show Hip Hip Hooray, where he played Cyrus. I came to know recently that now he's settled in New Zealand and he's working as an accountant there or something. I was like, okay, chalo, somebody got away from show business and, apna ek life settle ho gaya types. Because I remember he used to be in all the ads back then as well. And Hame Rahi Pyar Ke, of course, he was there. But Hip Hip Hooray is like that quintessential 90s memory for a lot of us 90s kids. Yeah.
Guys, how do you rank Aatish in terms of Sanjay Gupta's filmography?
Number one for me.
Yeah, probably for me too. Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of Musafir as well, which I know a lot of people don't like Musafir. But again, I think the styling on Musafir was completely unique and different to anything that had been done before. But Aatish will always be number one because he married this Hollywood style action filmmaking with a very, very strong emotional core in Aatish. And that was very unique again for a person who was the age he was then to take on this responsibility. I know you have a huge budget and you have a big banner backing you, but it's also a huge responsibility to deliver a polished product, which I think he did in spades.
And especially for that time, like Vikram said before, for 94, it really looked like something was being done for the first time. It's that kind of a style, it's that kind of a aesthetic. So I think especially if you take into account the time and the age at which he made this film, I would also rank Atish as his number one film. I by the way, I like Kate a lot too. So Kate is also up there. And Musafir, I like parts of Musafir, but I'm not completely sold on the entire movie. But that story from Das Kahaniya, man, that is straight up my eye. I love that story.
For me, it's Atish. No doubt. Atish is my favorite. After that, Kante. And I like Musafir. Again, bits and parts. I like Sanjay Dutt's character. I used to copy Sanjay Dutt. You used to do that nice stunt in that movie. I used to do with TV remote.
Saurabh, would you have one remote by close to you so that you can show us your skills there?
I have this power bank. I can do this.
Awesome.
So yeah, Atish is my favorite. After that, Kante. Because Atish, you see, like a young guy, a first-time filmmaker, is making such a stylish movie in that too in 90s. Because early 90s, if you see, that 80s hangover was still there. From 90 to the making style, that stock music background score. So this guy, okay, I agree that he uses all these Hollywood background scores, but still, it it has that vibe, a stylish, a freshness is still there. So for that, I kudos to Sanjay Gupta. So still, this is my favorite Sanjay Gupta film, and this is my favorite Sanju Baba's film also, Sanjay Dutt's.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And talking about Aditya Panchali being underrated, I like his performance in Awwal Number also.
Oh, yes. I want to see that movie. It's been a while since I watched that movie.
Yeah, for me, I'd say Kante is always a favorite because I remember at that time, I was in ninth when this movie came out. And I think it released the same weekend as Satya. I mean, this is something I keep tweeting about often because that was a particularly memorable weekend. I used to be a quizzer in high school. So that weekend, I think I'd won a quiz. So अपने को थोड़ा cash prize मिला है, like चलो video library चल के कुछ rent कर लेते हैं. And I think because back then in Mangalore, what used to happen was most movies would release 2 to 3 weeks late in the theaters. Because what used to happen is still multiplexes came to Mangalore, except for maybe a few movies that were really in demand. Most Hindi movies used to come maybe 1 or 2 weeks late. Because there was also this other thing going on around that time. I have vague memories that, Kannada movie, local language movie releases should be given preference and all that. So our only option was the not so favorable one. So I'd go to the video library, I'd see, oh, Kante and Satya have both come. I'm like, हाँ, चलो पहले Kante देखते हैं. I'm watching the movie and I'm like, zapped here. I'm like, this is like proper, क्या बोलते हैं? I mean, of course, you can't make out that, okay, maybe parts of it are shot in Canada or whatever. That doesn't matter. The way the movie is shot, the general cool level of cool in the movie, that is something. Musafir, while yes, it has its issues, there are certain bits in the middle that you want to fast forward through and all. Musafir, I think, is the movie that had the most cult appeal of all Sanjay Gupta movies, in my opinion, because Sanjay Dutt's character, that general style, the whole Tez Dhar and everything, that really changed something. And that was also part of the reason why I went through junior college and degree saying, मेरे को घंटा फर्क नहीं पड़ता, like Aditya Pancholi's character in Musafir. Of course, thankfully, I didn't get thrashed for it, but yeah. And in terms of underrated Gupta movies, I'd say Jung. Because Jung has, of course, Jung, even he disowned it, I think, because there were some issues with it. And I think Baba didn't dub for the movie and all. I don't remember all those details. But the movie's action sequences are crazy, man. Like very high energy. And yeah, Ram Shastra is definitely cult because again,
Yeah.
like Aatish, inspired by a nice Steven Seagal movie and all, which also would go on to inspire Rakshak.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I think Mithun movie called Cheetah also.
Yes.
So
Yes.
these are my because see, I watched Shootout at Wadala, I watched Mumbai Saga as soon as they came out and all, and frankly, they are fun movies. But वो संजय गुप्ता वाला ठप्पा नहीं, वो वाली
Yeah.
बात नहीं.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I feel bad because see, Kabil, that way I enjoyed a lot because this was Sanjay Gupta trying something different and it worked. I don't know how it did at the box office, frankly, I don't care, but I love Kabil. And I think Kabil was supposedly made in the early 90s as Bulandi with Salman Khan and Somi Ali, but it was shelved or something, I don't know. But I love Kabil a lot. Lovely movie.
Yeah, Ram Shastra was, I think, Hard to Kill, right? That Steven Seagal movie. It was based on that. Yeah, I think I really wish Sanjay Gupta and Sanjay Dutt work again because they were such a killer combo, man. I mean, they were like Baba, Nawab, in terms of like a cinematic collaboration. I think Sanjay Gupta really knew how to crank up Sanjay Dutt's persona. And Sanjay Dutt, you could tell that he was at very ease with Sanjay Gupta, whenever he was working with him. So I think, that was a killer combination. And I really hope that, those two, the Baba and Nawab of Hindi films, get back together.
You have not talked much about Atul Agnihotri and that
Please,
sort
yes,
of
of course.
encapsulates his role in the movie. No, but I remember he was in everything at that time because I remember he was there in this. He was in Krantiveer. He was in this Mahesh Bhatt movie that I like a lot called Naraz with Mithun
Oh, yeah.
Chakravarti. And
Sir
in all
also.
this yeah. And in all these movies, it's like he just shows up, there's at least one scene where he's going and screaming at everyone, and you're like, "Bhai, chill, chill."
And Atul Agnihotri always gets good songs also.
Yes,
Like
he has some
Mahal
great
Mein
songs.
Maine,
Yeah, absolutely.
Aatish.
The best, the absolute. And
Vikram
Ravina and Karishma in this movie sort of look like they're carrying forward their feud from Andaz Apna Apna. But have to say,
to the credit of the writers, Robin Bhatt and Sujit Sen, both of those characters are relatively well written for that time. They are not just like they just show up in the songs or something like that. There is a
no,
certain
they have that emotional heft, especially in the end. Where both of them stand up for their boyfriends, and they are arguing with each other. And there's this lovely scene where Sanju Baba, before going out to finally for the final confrontation with Shakti and gang, he marries Ravina and he tells her, "Okay, अभी और ये अब तुम्हारा ख्याल रखेंगे." I like that scene. It's like it added a nice touch.
Yes, and all those scenes, they're all melodramatic, but they work. They fall in the right place. Avnish, you wanted to add something?
No, just speaking about Atul Agnihotri. Actually, Atul Agnihotri and Mr. Sanjay Gupta met when they were both assisting Pankaj Parashar. So that's when they kind of became friends with each other, and that friendship lasted through to his debut in Aatish.
This is on Jalwa?
He was not on Jalwa. They did a few ads, I think.
Oh, okay. Because Atul Agnihotri must be relatively younger, right?
Yeah, he is a bit younger, and he was also one of the chief assistants on Jalwas. By which time, Tataran moved on to Rajasthan and did including Thanedar.
Man, Rajan Sippi is another guy that I would love to reach out to. I would love to have him on the podcast. He's made so many films that I doubt if any of today's generation, knows about these films. And yeah. And, unfortunately, he did a lot of, well, I shouldn't say unfortunately, but he did a lot of like B movies later on in his career, like a lot of people do. And, but there's so many films that he did before that, that are just wonderful. But yeah, that's just something that
it's not just him. There's this other director from the 80s whose masala offerings I really enjoy. Shibu Mitra.
Oh yeah.
And judging by your expressions, you guys are like, yeah, my man. Because 80s movies. See, these guys, even though these movies were your cliched old story, whatever, you watch them. There's that, like I said, there's that energy. You watch them, okay, you're in for a good time.
Yeah, all those guys. Another guy that I'm a huge fan of is Sashilal Nair. K. Sashilal Nair.
Mm. Hey, by the way, one small trivia, not a trivia, this is just my theory. Uh, do you guys remember a Sanjay Dutt movie from around that same time called Andolan?
Absolutely, yeah.
With Govinda.
Yeah. I have a nagging suspicion that the climax of Andolan, the action sequences again, which are in Mauritius, were shot at the same time as Aatish. Because ek to not just the same hairstyle, same banyan, same jeans. And
I wouldn't
it's
be
almost
surprised. I wouldn't be surprised.
no, because see what happened is Andolan is another movie. I used to see a lot of posters for it in the Indian Express and Times of India back in '95 because Sanjeev Baba was in jail that time, and I think this was one of
Right.
the first movies that came out after his arrest. So there was a lot of this sympathy wave due to which I think this movie got a decent opening. And all. I don't know how it did later on at the box office, but I would go on to watch it. And I think a few months back on a Sunday with my morning coffee, I was like, "Chalo, aaj kuch purana dekhte hain." And I see, okay, Andolan is there. Like, "Chalo, I'll watch this." And I'm watching it. I'm enjoying it. There's a lot of fun stuff going on for a different podcast someday. And then I see the climax, and there's this chase sequence happening, and I'm like, "This field I've seen somewhere before. This beach I've seen somewhere before. This general view, this looks very familiar."
Yes.
And suddenly,
Yes.
अबे ये तो आतिश के टाइम का सीन शूट
Climax.
किया है.
Yeah, I
For all
wouldn't be
you know,
surprised, Vikram, because they did that a lot, and especially I don't know if when it was shot, because when I think it was kind of clear that Sanjay Dutt might go to prison or something like that. I think they had to kind of rush some of his schedules and kind of.
so for all you know, the Andolan team landed up there, and Sanjay Gupta might have been like, "चल मेरा कैमरा तू ले चल जल्दी नक्की कर." But this is something damn funny that I found because the rest of the movie is very, your standard
Yeah.
80s ka hangover wala movie like Saurabh said. But this particular sequences that are shot in Mauritius, they have a nice, they're shot in a more stylish way. So you kind of think, did Sanjay Gupta help out with something or?
Yeah, he could have. He could have ghost directed them. Who knows? Yeah.
I want to add one action. I want to talk about one action sequence, which I think is inspired from another John Woo's movie, The Killer. The Killer, I guess. The Killer. So there's a scene where Sanju goes back to Ancient Goes then, I guess, where he says before going, he says that ये plates मैं वापस लेने आऊंगा छोटे का मान रखने के लिए, something he says, and he goes back. Then there's an action sequence where he keeps a gun on the table and then he flips that and comes back and then he shoots. That is taken from The Killer, I guess. John Woo.
Yeah,
And
Chow Yun
talking-
Fat's scene. Yeah, I think it's
Yeah.
even the clothes are the same. I think even the styling is the same. Yeah, yeah.
I'm
Sorry,
talking about yeah.
That reminded me of something I forgot to mention. My absolute favorite dialogue in the film, which I wanted to mention but slipped my mind, is when he goes to Shakti Kapoor then. And Shakti Kapoor says, "Join me. Nawab bhi mere paas hai. Join me. Come back to work for me." And he says, "I'll give 5% to your brother as a bribe," and stuff like that. So Sanjay Dutt shoots his henchman dead and puts the gun up his throat and says, "कपड़े बदल के और सोने की चेन डाल के ड्राइवर को भी डॉन नहीं बन सकता है, समझा?" And that is my absolute favorite because we used that in college all year to put somebody in there. Year long we used it in college. So yeah, that's my absolute favorite dialogue from the film.
And talking about inspiration, we missed this. Better Tomorrow was partially inspired from Brothers, another Hong Kong movie, which was official remake of Diwar.
Yes, yes, yes. It was. Yeah. I mean, the whole brothers strand is from Diwar, no doubt. Yeah.
One more question, Himanshu, you may know this because in Better Tomorrow there's a scene where this guy Tom Chipat, he burns the note.
Yeah.
Do you think Sanjay Gupta might have thought that scene we will use in Aatish also, but it will create controversy.
Yeah, I don't know, but that's a big meme as well, right? And that scene became a darling of a lot of the Wall Street guys during the 80s rush, in the 80s gold rush, kind of, so to speak, on Wall Street. And a lot of young traders used to do that, actually, young bankers. They used to burn a Benjamin, like $100 bill, and light the cigar with it. So that scene also has a lot of history and pop culture references to it. But yeah, I don't know if Sanjay Gupta contemplated recreating that scene too. But yeah, that might have created some controversy, because obviously there is a different connotation to money in our culture. So thank you so much, guys. I know we went overboard in terms of the time a little bit, but I really appreciate you guys taking out the time to come and
Hey, no
chat about
problem.
Atish.
Thank you so
Please,
much for
any other cult movies, please feel free to invite me.
Oh, definitely, definitely, guys. Thank you so much, guys. If you liked the episode, do consider supporting the show. Your support will help me continue creating content like this. You can find the link for supporting the show in the show notes and on the pod website. Also, do share this episode on Twitter, Insta, or Facebook. And do subscribe, rate, and review the pod wherever you listen to your pods. You can follow me on Twitter and Insta at loveofcinemasf8. Feel free to reach out there or by email with your comments, feedback, and suggestions. You can find my email in the show notes. That's the episode. This is Himanshu signing off. And as always, thank you for listening to the Love of Cinema podcast.